Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 13th of November 2014, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio is Nick on the technical side, but I'm your host. Well, there we are. Weather across the country, dismal, gales, drizzly, overcast, raining, torrential rain. It's pretty bad, it would seem, throughout the most of UK. So we'll just leave the weather. What's happening in UK at the moment? Well, according to UK Column and many other organisations watching basic liberties and freedoms for people, there is clearly a dictatorship building. And Theresa May, the Home Secretary, is often a focus of our attention. Very interesting here that we've got once again in a major article with the Mail, Tories' Bill of Rights will protect the free press. And the Culture Secretary as well says that the Tories will commit to changes that will alter special protection. A Bill of Rights should include protection for the press. That's Mr. Sajid Javid is saying. He's also committing the Tories to strengthening law on journalist freedom. There's going to be a new Bill of Rights which will restore British judges as arbiters of justice. And there's more legal measures for journalists. So I'll just put in this comment here by Viscount Rothermere, publisher of the Daily Mail. He warned last month of an anti-press climate and said that journalists were being crushed by the full weight of the law, in sharp contrast with those in the city whose greed almost caused our entire banking system to collapse. So we've got some pretty interesting things happening at the moment, but what the government is trying to have us believe is trust us, trust the Lib Dem Con organisation in order to protect your rights and freedoms. We will bring in a new Bill of Rights. We will protect the press, when of course what we are seeing is the exact opposite happening. So if you haven't already seen the latest UK Column, I'd encourage you to get hold of a copy of that paper and have a look at what we have been saying about the Bill of Rights, what we've been saying about personal freedoms, and you will find constant warnings that while the state preaches freedoms, what's actually happening is that David Cameron and Nick Clegg's coalition is stripping personal freedoms away. Is the mainstream press starting to wake up? Well, we think there are one or two signs that the grey cells are moving, and we'll come on to that a little bit later in today's news. What's the reality of liberty in UK in 2014? Well, we can't sum it up better than to remind people that while you've been enjoying a normal life, campaigner against child abuse Robert Greene is now on his 177th day under house arrest, reporting to his local police station as part of his bail conditions. His only crime has been to try and protect children from abuse, and of course he's been constantly campaigning for justice for child abuse victim Holly Gregg. Remember that the trial is supposedly taking place in Scotland in January. Robert still has no clear details of what he's actually charged with. He has told me yesterday that there are some things beginning to move around the case. I do not know what he means there in detail, but I'm hoping to speak to him later today. But this is not a third world country. This is not an overseas African dictatorship. Robert Greene sits at home. He has to report to the police daily. He cannot use the internet. And as I say, his crime is that he has been trying to protect children from abusers within the Scottish establishment and legal system. We'll also come back onto the subject of Melanie Shaw. Well, we've said quite a lot about Melanie over many months, but what I really want to say today is a very big thank you to all those of you who've sent postal orders. The total so far is £125. That's as a result of the plea that we put out yesterday that Melanie is effectively having every door shut in her face now that she's returned to Nottingham. So whereas previously she was having a reasonable quality of life with appropriate help from the NHS and medication, her leg ulcer was being treated, she was receiving benefits, and she was receiving assistance with housing. All of a sudden, that has all become very difficult. And so over the last few days, Melanie has been in a very precarious position where she has been unable to properly access her own funds, and hence the plea that we've put out. So this is the reality. We have Theresa May and Mr. Javid talking about freedoms and liberty. What we actually see coming into the UK at the moment is an increasingly vicious dictatorship which simply does not want to know about people who've been hurt and damaged by the system, or of course have got no money to run their lives. Well, the police form a key topic in as much as many people are saying that they've been harassed or abused by the police. We know there are many good men and women within Britain's police force, but we are seeing article after article in the mainstream press and certainly mainstream media covering the weaknesses of police forces, and in particular their failure to get to grips with child abuse, particularly where the trail leads to the establishment or Westminster. So an interesting article from The Guardian here which says that oh dear, we have 3 police forces, Essex, North Yorkshire and North Wales, and they're going to face an inquiry because they haven't been doing their job with regard to following through with investigations on people handling child abuse images. And the article is saying, well, don't worry, because there's going to be an investigation carried out by the Independent Police Complaints Commission. But of course, many people in the country are themselves complaining about IPCC, saying that the one thing it clearly isn't, which is independent. But nevertheless, it appears that something is taking place here, and we are told by The Guardian to relax and trust the Independent Police Complaints Commission, who are now starting to look into no less than 3 of our police forces who are failing to do their job with regard to child abuse. Meanwhile, in Westminster, Mr. Keith Vaz MP has been fronting up the inquiry, where he's now brought in front of the panel in the House 3 people who are supposedly representing child abuse victims. We've got Alison Miller from Lee Day Law Firm. This is a law firm that says it now has considerable numbers of people coming forward as abuse victims. They now form the clients for that company. We've got Mr. Peter Saunders from NAPAC and Hilary Wilmer from Parents Against Child Exploitation. So on one hand, we can say, well, there does seem to be some movement towards getting representatives of victims coming to the fore. But I also know that many people are saying, well, this is not quite right, because you can't possibly say that just 3 people can represent the tens of thousands of victims who have been abused either at home or in other circumstances or within the care system. So we're going to watch the activities of Mr. Keith Vaz very closely. And I think I'm right in saying this interesting gentleman was also part of the legal team for the local authority where Elm House was cited. So perhaps there's some interesting research to be done on how independent Mr. Keith Vaz is from all of these matters. But at the moment, perhaps we should take things on face value. This was sent through to us last night, and we decided it was a very interesting document. Essentially, this is a PDF document from NSPCC, which is talking about abuse and neglect and the child protection system. It's in this particular section talking about referrals accepted by social services. But what caught the eye of the person who sent it in to us was that if you look at NSPCC's own internal data for where this document was stored, it appears to be stored in a folder file called Global Assets. And we're just very curious as to what a child protection charity would be doing with anything labelled global assets. Are we to assume that children are considered global assets by NSPCC? So on one hand, this may be something. On the other hand, it may have a very easy explanation. But we agree with the person who sent it through to us that there seems to be something extremely odd about this particular file name, if indeed that is what it is. And if I just bring on this organisation, we've got another very large charity which specialises in children and the fostering of children, and it calls itself Core Assets. This is probably just another coincidence, but it is rather interesting that following on from the widespread use of the term human resources, we're now labelling children as assets. We can get a little bit deeper into this by just having a look at the LinkedIn page for this lady, Eileen Skerman. We're not saying that this lady has done anything wrong at all. All we're simply putting up on screen, and people can see this for themselves, is she gives some very interesting detail to do with her job as a procurement project manager for NSPCC. And again, the person who sent this through to us said that what is particularly interesting is that the language is exactly the same language as a profit-making corporation. So basically, we're looking across spending analysis, we're looking at marketing, advertising, procurement, savings. But in the last part of this text, she actually says that she's provided areas of opportunity for a buying consortium with 4 major children's charities. So is it the case we're dealing with children's charities, or have we got a rather different beast emerging, which appears to be a mixture between big corporate business and what we would traditionally call a charity? Well, let's just move on to the subject of Nottinghamshire Police. Obviously, UK Column has been increasingly critical of Nottinghamshire Police's failure to investigate child abuse, but we thought it was important to flag up this story here on the BBC, but it has appeared now in other newspapers, that a young girl was injured when she was part of a party visiting Nottinghamshire Police, and an armed police officer accidentally discharged his weapon, and the young girl had a slight injury to her face as a result of being hit by the ejected cartridge. Now, the significance of this story is that Nottinghamshire Police didn't bother to tell anybody for about a week. And the comment here from the BBC is Nottinghamshire's Chief Constable has denied there was a cover-up after a young girl was injured when an officer accidentally fired his gun. The 7-year-old was hit in the face by an empty cartridge while on a tour of the force headquarters, but it was not made public for a week. Chris Eyre said Nottinghamshire Police had been open and transparent, but the family did not want any publicity. Well, let's have a look at the second remark there. He said that the group of children had unexpectedly met an armed officer, and as he was checking his gun was safe, he accidentally fired it into the ground. Now, this is the police service which say that they're capable of investigating child abuse. They invite children into their headquarters where there are policemen wandering around with armed weapons, and presumably the training of those officers is so poor that they do a check procedure on their gun in front of young children, presumably showing off. And obviously this young lady was very lucky not to have been seriously hurt or killed. So nothing was reported to the mainstream press for a week. Police and Crime Commissioner Paddy Tipping said he believed there had been disagreements in the force over its handling of the case, and that the Chief Constable accepted he'd made a mistake, although Mr Eyre said he made a decision for what he felt was the right reasons. So we have yet another case of Britain's police forces armed to the teeth with automatic weapons, clearly being handled by officers who are not capable of taking on the role of handling loaded armed weapons, be it handguns or automatic weapons. And by the same token, we would say that this suggests to us that the Chief Constable, Chris Eyre, should be removed from his position, not only for this failing, but for the clear failure to investigate under Operation Daybreak the abuses in Beechwood Children's Home. Well, the UK Column is not the only organisation that's picked up on some of these things. The Press Gazette has got a fantastic article here, which I'm going to encourage everybody to go and read. It says, "We are not the enemy. Editors from around the UK tell the Association of Chief Police Officers media lead about problems in dealing with the police." So let's have a look at what they say. We'll just go to the meat in this text. It's a little bit small, but basically the press people present was saying that relationships with the police are not good. The editor of the Nottinghamshire Post, Mr Sassy, said that Nottinghamshire police see themselves as the publisher. And of course, it's been UK Column that recently has been pointing out that a gentleman called Matt Tapp, who seems to have media contracts with every police force in the country, including the Met, has been the man that Nottinghamshire Police and many other police forces have been using to control media around child abuse cases. But Mr Sassy went on to say the police had all the details and they chose not to say anything. And he was referring to the firearms incident, which we've just covered. And he finished off by saying this is how they operate. They don't want to give us the information. Well, another editor, Paul Connew, said that he'd worked on documentaries looking at the Savile and Rotherham child abuse scandals and spoken to retired police officers who had tried to blow the whistle internally but found that things were buried. So here we've got factual comment about police covering up child abuse, covering up the discharge of weapons, and of course what the public doesn't know becomes extremely dangerous. The Society of Editors director Bob Satchwell raised concerns about police use of the REAPER legislation. He said, "I was there when REAPER was being introduced. There is no doubt in my mind or ageing memory that the government and Parliament intended REAPER as a tool to help with terrorism and major organised crime." And he later added, "There is of course a balance to be struck between privacy and freedom of the media and the public's right to know. It strikes me that the European Convention on Human Rights was written by British judges after the Second World War to counteract totalitarian states and the most powerful weapon of dictators, a secret police force." And this is the key bit. He says, "Now it seems we are dancing slowly towards a state that curtails the media, invades individual privacy more than the media has ever done, and reduces the public's ability to receive information." So I think this is an extremely encouraging report that the Press Gazette has put out, where we've got editors of local newspapers coming forward with deep concerns, both the way over local police forces are operating, but also, of course, as to how information to do with the police is being withheld, or indeed the police are attacking journalists. So do go and have a read of that article. The gentleman's description was dancing slowly towards a state that curtails the media. We think this is a local story that supports that view. It's come from the Plymouth Herald, and the headline is that postmen are to join the hunt for abducted children. And what the story essentially says is that Plymouth Posties have now teamed up with the charity Missing People. The country's 124,000 postmen and women will be joining the hunt for people who've disappeared. Now, we believe there's something deeply, deeply sinister in this because we would say very gently that it's apparent to us that the local post can't always deliver their letters on time or in the right letterbox. But now we have postal men and women across the country essentially being used as what? Eyes and ears of the police to look for missing persons, eyes and ears of social services to look for children that they claim have been abducted. Is their primary job to deliver letters, or have we got another addition to the Stasi state? I'll let you consider it. But we're going to stay local with another story. This is the Plymouth Herald. This is quite a normal story. It would occur across the country because our local High Sheriff has just been announced, or the replacement has been announced, and it's retired Admiral Sir James Michael Burnett Nugent. And he's going to become High Sheriff. But what we were particularly interested in was the article said this, that the High Sheriffs also have a responsibility for protection of High Court judges. And we'd like to ask our audience, how does this work in practice? Are we saying that High Court judges are above the law? Are we saying that High Court judges are able to call on a special protection system that's not available to ordinary people? And just why is it that any High Sheriff should be giving his time to protect High Court judges? So we're very curious about this one. Anybody who's got any information or would like to do any research, please get in contact with the UK column. Brace yourselves. We've reminded you over the last couple of days that the real danger in Britain is the quality of the politicians in Westminster. And over the last couple of days, we put up something equivalent to this, which was the Daily Mail saying that the MOD has been warning senior officers, particularly in the military and the civil service, that if you go to work in Russia or China, you may be liable to a sex trap by particularly attractive women. So the Mail article here has, I would say, a very attractive young lady casually sipping her coffee, and she's about to prey on one of the quality British politicians. Well, is she the problem, or is the problem the quality of the politicians we can see on the right of our screen? We have got two gentlemen. We've got Brooks Newmark and we've got Chris Bryant posing in a way that I believe would present a security risk. And on that note, we are going to go across to a video clip featuring Guy Taylor, who's going to be talking about some recent events which involved our security service, MI5. Over.
Right, my name's Guy Taylor. I'm here with a group of citizens from all over the United Kingdom, from various parts of the United Kingdom, and we've all come here today to discuss the issues that we've had with the court service, the police, the judiciary in general. We've all had our homes stolen, we've had property stolen, we've had court cases where none of the documentation has been anywhere near correct. In fact, it's been fraudulent and fraudulently produced. We have evidence of everything that I'm saying. We have tried all remedy through the court service. We have tried remedy through the police. We have found no remedy because all the participants have been acting in conjunction with each other in wholesale domestic terrorism. They've been doing this against the public in general and committing perpetual crime as far as we can see. We have therefore gone to the MI5 Security Service terrorism website, and we've come across their definition of terrorism, which is as follows. Terrorism presents a serious and sustained threat to the United Kingdom and UK interests abroad. Terrorist groups seek to cause widespread disruption, fear and intimidation, They use violence or the threat of violence as a means of publicising their causes, motivating those who might be sympathetic to them and intimidating those who do not sympathise. They often aim to influence government policies, and they often reject existing democratic processes or even democracy itself as a means of achieving their objectives. Although there is no generally agreed definition of terrorism internationally, in the UK the Terrorism Act 2000 defines terrorism as the use of threat of action designed to influence the government or an international governmental organisation or to intimidate the public, or a section of the public made for the purposes of advancing a political, religious, racial or ideological cause, and it involves or causes the following: serious violence against a person, serious damage to a property, a threat to a person's life, a serious risk to the health and safety of the public, or serious interference with or disruption to an electronic system. Now we could go through each one of those independently. Serious violence against a person. People have been thrown in the streets and left homeless. Serious damage to a property. Properties have been taken over and the property is damaged. A threat to a person's life. People have committed suicide, being put into situations where they're unlawfully put into bankruptcy. A serious risk to the health and safety of the public, as what I've already said. Or the serious interference with or disruption to an electronic system. Well, we know, and we have mountains of evidence, that the electronic system used by the courts either isn't fit for purpose or is being completely misused by the judiciary, and the police unknowingly are being refused access to the files which contain the public's records. And when we get the records that should be public, they contain no seals. They contain nothing to support. They've gone through the public courts. They've been dealt with in a private capacity. In fact, horse trading is going on in this country with the citizens of this public's property. And the courts are not operating in the public capacity, they're operating in a private capacity. So it's our intention now as a group we've all discussed it, is to ring MI5, the security service, based on what their website, and we'll see where we go from there, and we'll get back to you.
MI5 phone line. If you wish to speak with one of our officers, hold the line and you will be connected shortly. Contact details for MI5 can be found on our website at www.mi5.gov.uk. Thank you.
Make a blank, bottom button, press that if it is blank. Simple one.
Hello, I'm at a meeting with a group of concerned citizens, and we'd like to report some terrorist actions to you that have been ongoing against us as members of the public. We could really do with someone coming around and talking to us. There's a group of us, and we've come from all over the UK. We're all victims of domestic terrorism, and we need protection. So, can someone come around and see us, please?
Your local police. Okay?
We've done that. We've done that on many occasions. All of this.
Well, that is the correct course of action. We can't. That is, it's criminal activity against and threats being meant against you and your friends or colleagues. Therefore, it is a police matter.
So, again.
It's terrorism.
It's terrorism. We're being terrorised. We've read your what you've written on your website, the security service, terrorism, MI5, the security service. And I can give you the definition of it if you want. I mean, I suggest you
don't
could.
need to do that. I'm very
Well, no. So we're telling you that we're victims of terrorism, and you're telling us that although you're MI5, you're not actually engaged in investigating terrorism at all.
No, I'm not saying that at all. You're telling me that the threats are being made against you and you're being threatened. Therefore, that is a police matter. You need to go to your police station and report it to the local police.
Right. Who am I speaking to, please?
It doesn't matter who you're speaking to. I'm giving you the advice.
Right. Okay. Okay. Carry on with the paedophilia. All right. Bye.
Goodbye.
So we've been told to come to the police station to report the crime of terrorism, so we're here and we're about to go into the police station to report terrorism.
Well, there you have it, a fascinating report by Guy Taylor and the Get Out of Debt Free team as to what happens when you start to press home charges of corruption, criminal activity, bullying, threats, violence to the very organisations who, of course, boast that they're here to protect us. So MI5, pretty good at warning off senior military officers to the dangers of sexy Russian women, but they're not so hot when it comes to massive fraud and corruption within Britain's civil service, within the courts and within the police. What Guy and the team did there, I think, is very valuable because, of course, for many, many years, British security services, MI5 and MI6, have regarded themselves as above the law and certainly beyond the reach of reasonable questioning by members of the public. So if you feel upset by that video and the response from MI5, then of course do visit their website and take note of who is running MI5 for some possible complaints procedures. It would also be a good question, I would suggest, for your local MP, and if you can't get any response from them, from the local Conservative or Labour association. Well, we'll just bring this gentleman back on screen, Michael Shrimpton. We just want to say, think about what this gentleman has done in line with what you've just seen Guy talking about. Is it now the case that if members of the public report what they believe is crime, if the state doesn't believe that your accusations hold any water, then you can expect to be on trial yourself? That puts a very, very interesting flavour on should we as members of the community report crime. Of course we should, and we also know where that crime is being committed in Westminster, in the courts, amongst the high level of the judiciary, supported of course by the corruption at the top level of Britain's police. But the fallout from this type of activity can affect people in many ways. And we'd just like to bring in this story. It's a local one really, because it's back to the Navy, and it was only a few weeks ago that we were seeing massive coverage of the equipping of RFA Argus before she sailed down to Sierra Leone in order to put Royal Marines and medical teams ashore to help fight Ebola. Well, the story that has emerged around RFA Argus is really very interesting indeed, because we now know for certain that military personnel on board RFA Argus have been given the anti-malarial drug Lariam. And the reason that this is of interest is because there has been huge controversy over this drug and its dangerous side effects. But we just bring you here to NHS Choices, where you can go and you can actually see an overview of this drug. And even the NHS at the moment has got a little bit hesitant about prescribing Lariam. There are other products on the market which do not have the side effects which are causing most concern. Who's producing it? Well, it's this pharmaceutical company Roche, and again you can visit their website and have a look at the sort of things that they're doing, and you can also go to other websites such as drugs.com to actually have a look at the side effects, because it's these side effects which are now known to have occurred amongst service personnel on board RFA Argus, and these would be of great concern to somebody in any form of manual job, certainly, but a job of responsibility, train driver for example, but certainly for armed forces. If we can just pop that one back on screen, Nick, we can just have a look at some of the side effects here. And I know the text is small, so we'll do a little bit of labelling. This drug can create anxiety, confusion, hallucinations, seeing, hearing or feeling things that are not there. And it can also cause mental depression. Those are some of the major ones, but we believe that some of these some of the personnel on board RFA Argus have already been affected with these type of side effects. And on this particular website, there's other side effects which are listed, although they say there's an incidence, but they're not known, so it gets a little bit vague. Well, if we have a look back over time, the Independent here ran an article where they were saying that then the previous head of the army, Lord Richard Dannatt, had been saying that the MOD should follow the US example and no longer prescribe Lariam. So it was withdrawn for use in the States and with American military troops as the risks were too high. But what Richard Dannatt was saying here is, well, if the Americans have decided this is dangerous, it should be stopped for British military personnel as well. Of course, the MOD has done no such thing, and as we're now seeing, there have been side effects encountered. The Guardian here also running a story saying it's not a benign drug, and this is an article to do with a young lady who died, and supporters of this particular lady said that she died unnecessarily as they claim a direct result of the dangerous side effects of Lariam. Now, the lady who provided the health advice to the troops on board RFA Argus before they sailed was a Dr. Ruth Howlett Shipley. We understand that she is the public health consultant to the Royal Navy. But what becomes most interesting is it's difficult to find out any details about this lady and what her qualifications are to be briefing the military on the danger of Ebola. So we found her mentioned on NHS Portsmouth. This is linked in, of course, with Portsmouth City Council, as you can see, and highlighted in red. It was actually Dr. Ruth Howlett Shipley who gave her apologies for missing that particular meeting, but it says that she's a public health consultant to the Royal Navy. Well, here she is also connected into Creative Care in Dorset. Fascinating title there. And if we just bring up part of this document, we find that apparently this lady is or was Deputy Director of Public Health, NHS Dorset. So we're going to say that we find it remarkable that somebody who is providing advice on the handling of Ebola, she's being used to give major advice to the military, including the Royal Navy, on how to deal with the risk of Ebola. When you search for her qualifications over the internet, you come up with virtually nothing. But meanwhile, it was also pointed out to us that Lariam was given to prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, and it was prescribed in large doses because apparently it was found particularly effective at disorientating prisoners before they were put through interrogation systems. So there we have it. The American military has seen fit to stop prescribing this drug. The Ministry of Defence has been warned over many months and years of the dangers of Lariam and the side effects, but they have decided that this is the drug to be administered to sailors and other military personnel on board RFA Argus. Incompetence, a mistake, or deliberate? We'll leave you to think about that. And perhaps you might also like to reflect on whether your postman or woman will be gently lifting the lid of your letterbox to see whether there's any missing children inside your house. Well, that's it. Britain in 2014. Louise will be back with us. She has been a very busy mother today. Children poorly. I thought I'd tell you because you'd like to know. And I'll be joined by Mike Robinson tomorrow. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.